We're going to move on to topic number 7, and that one is Kimi Raikkonen, who has retired from F1 racing. He's obviously going to finish up the season for Alfa Romeo, but the Iceman, Kimi Raikkonen, I know you're a big fan, Brandon, so what do you think about this guy retiring?
Huge Kimi Raikkonen fan, the Iceman of Formula One, the most experienced driver on the Formula One grid, the oldest driver on the grid. But honestly, he still had a lot of talent left in the tank, and I still think we've seen that this year. Even though at times his teammate Antonio Giovinazzi has outdriven him in the same car, I still think Kimi Raikkonen has proven his worth as an F1 driver this year. And I think he was the one that made this decision in the end. I think if I was Alfa Romeo, I clearly would have wanted Kimi Raikkonen back. And if I had the chance to pair him up with the likes of Valterri Botas, I would have had really one of the strongest grid pairings on the grid with two of the most experienced drivers and two of the best drivers, honestly. But I really think going back to when F1 said that they were going to change the regulations in 2022, that Kimi Raikkonen said, well, I think, you know what, I'm not going to move on with those change of regulations. And then when he really got a look at the car, the new car of 2022, I really don't think he was impressed at all. I don't think he liked it. This is a guy that at many a times has said that F1 is his hobby and that he did not have to be driving Formula One anymore, and that he just continued to doing it because he loved doing it. He loved the current cars. He loved to go fast, and he loved driving these current cars. So then when you take away these current cars and you switch the regulations and you bring in a whole new car, I really think Kimi Raikkonen was not impressed and was like, this is my time to step away. I'm not going to move on to these new regulations. I'm just going to kind of enjoy this like final moment and ride off into the sun in an amazing fast car in these current F1 regulations. But like I said, we're talking about a guy that's been around for decades and has brought, honestly, some of the greatest moments to Formula One history. First off, he is the 2007 Formula One champion. So he's got a driver's championship underneath his belt, man. So that's something that is, we all know, is hard to do. This guy pulled it off in 2007 and arguably had a couple other years where he put up a good fight and had a chance to win another one. But I think he's really one of the best drivers on the grid over these last 20 years. And right now, he's got the record for the most laps in an F1 car in history. He's driven the most laps in an F1 car in history. And I think it's going to be a while before we see that broken. And we might not even see that broken because you're going to have it broken by maybe the likes of either Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, or Sebastian Vettel, the other most experienced drivers that are going to still be left on the grid. If they want to continue on many more years, maybe they have a chance of breaking that record. But I really think it's a record that I think is going to be safe with Kimi Raikkonen with the most laps driven in an F1 car in history, which I think is amazing. That just tells you the longevity of how long he's been around. And we all know it's hard to stick around in F1. We were just talking about how Alex Albon got demoted in the blink of an eye, right? And in the blink of a second. And a lot of other drivers, the F1's one of those things where, what have you done for me lately? If you haven't done good, you haven't won races, you haven't pushed our car into the points, well, guess what? There's a lot of up-and-coming drivers in F2 and even in F3 or in Formula E at this point now that they're looking to bring up in and replace drivers that aren't getting it done. And that just shows you that Kimi Raikkonen was getting it done year after year, whether or not he was driving for Sauber or whether or not he was driving for Ferrari or for most recently driving for Alfa Romeo. Kimi Raikkonen was still showing that he was one of the best drivers on the grid, a class act, really one of the funniest drivers on the grid. This guy delivered some of the best one-liners, I think, in F1 history when we're talking about, one-liners, especially, give me my gloves. My gloves is one of them. And if you got to look back to that, the Brazilian Grand Prix where he wanted his glove so bad, and other times where he took an ice cream break during a red flag because he knew, the race was going to be over. So he went in the garage and grabbed himself an ice cream. Or my favorite Kimi Raikkonen moment was in the Monaco Grand Prix when the car failed on him and his engine gave way. He just got out of the car, and instead of walking back to the paddock, he walked back to his yacht, stripped himself of his helmet and his race suit, and began, drinking a couple of drinks on his yacht and enjoying that Monaco life. I think, besides those legendary moments off the track, Kimi Raikkonen has provided a lot of legendary moments on the track as well.
Yeah, no question. I mean, you look at a guy who's got 21 career wins, over 100 podiums in his career. Certainly an incredibly successful driver in F1, like you mentioned. Exciting to watch. Whether, like you said, whether it was with McLaren, Ferrari a second time, Alfa Romeo most recently. The guy's been awesome. He hasn't had a win since 2018. So you wonder, you mentioned he hasn't liked the car with Alfa Romeo recently, but he also mentioned, it's hard to stay on the F1 circuit for that long, and you do wonder, he's 41 years old. Is he starting to lose that intensity to have to be that you need to be on the circuit? Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, they seem like good guys out of the car, but as soon as they get in that car, they want to rip each other's throat out because they're just that competitive. And Raikkonen was certainly that during his career, but you wonder over the last couple of years, does he still have that edge? And maybe he doesn't. Who knows? I mean, he's certainly still got the talent. He's produced somewhat, but he hasn't gotten a win since 18. You do wonder if he's just lost that edge a little bit. And the best at what they do when they lose that edge say, maybe it's time for me to hang him up. So maybe that's what's going on with Raikkonen. But storybook career, has been incredibly successful. Like you mentioned, a lot of fun to watch, very entertaining driver. And yeah, I mean, if the race is over, why would you just want to go on your yacht in Monaco and have a couple of cocktails? That's what I do too. So good for him. But yeah, the sport's going to miss him, especially for the entertainment value of Raikkonen.
Yeah, I think, like you said, that the entertainment value, he was probably one of the most entertaining drivers on the grid. And, whether it be in his press conferences or, his interviews or even his team radio where, he got I believe it was at Imola last year in 2020, he had to serve a 5-second penalty. And his engineer gets on the radio and says, hey, we have a 5-second penalty. And he goes, for what? And then the guy goes, we've got a 5-second penalty. And he goes, for what? Like, he wanted to hear exactly what it was for. And so he's just got so many great memories and moments that he's done in Formula One over these last 2 decades. But yeah, you brought up his last win in 2018, and that was when he was driving for Ferrari, one of the best cars on the grid. And I think it is one of those things where if he still could be in one of the best cars, I still think he'd have that edge because he'd still be fighting in the front and he still has the talent to do it. But, being an Alfa Romeo, being a back marker and being at the back of the grid and seeing Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton and even your old teammate Sebastian Vettel flying by you, I think it's just really one of those things where you're like, yeah, you know what, maybe I want to go lay on that yacht a little bit more and just enjoy my life at this point. But watch out for Kimi Raikkonen's son as well, who Kimi Raikkonen a lot of times goes karting with him. He's a young up-and-coming guy. I mean, he's only, I believe he's less than 10 years old. But honestly, I could see Robin Raikkonen being an F1 driver coming up because he's just grown up around the sport, kind of like a Max Verstappen. And his dad just loves karting and loves motorsport, where I don't think Kimi Raikkonen is going to step away from motorsports at all. I still think he's going to be enjoying that because he's even said this is his hobby. This is what he loves to do. So I still think even in his retirement, he's going to be looking for some way to go fast. And honestly, if I'm a team in maybe DTM or GTE or endurance racing, if I'm looking for a driver, I'm probably going to look to try to see if I can recruit Kimi Raikkonen. Or honestly, a lot of times you'll see Formula One drivers go to IndyCar. So I've got to wonder if IndyCar is going to try to make a play to get Kimi Raikkonen into one of their cars. Or is Kimi Raikkonen going to say, you know what, no, I'm hanging it up for good and I'm done with racing. So that's going to be the question here over these next few months here is once this season's over, is Kimi Raikkonen just going to say, I'm done with racing, I'm going to be chilling on my yacht? Or am I going to go to F1 or GTE or DTM or whatever it may be or other form of racing? But yeah, inevitably, this guy is a legend in F1 and he's given us so many great moments here and we're certainly going to miss him.
Folks, if you like this show, you're watching it right now on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page. That's Comeback Sports on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel, Comeback Sports. And then all the cut-ups that our awesome producer, Ben Kudo, puts together after the show, that'll all filter to your YouTube channel. You don't have to go search for it. It's just right there in your subscriptions.